Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together.
I am here today with the incredible Emma Tessler. Emma, most people know you as the founder and CEO of 95 Media, and certainly they definitely know you as the podcast host of Stop Scrolling, Start Scaling, which I think is such a fantastic name. And I am excited to have you here today on Getting Rich Together as we not just unpack what has made you so successful, but the entire life journey of what is sort of bringing you value, gratitude, values based around money. It's going to be super fun and exciting. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. This is such a different conversation than most podcast talks. So this is going to be a good one.
Fabulous. So Emma, let's dive in. Let's start with a young Emma, someone who's somewhere between the ages of, let's say, 5 and 12 years old. Emma, where were you in the world at those ages? What was around you? And most importantly, what was money like? What did you see when you were younger?
Of course, at those ages, I was in school and doing the most and a very high overachiever in school, which I think a lot of founders are, because that's how you have to be kind of in your founder journey along the way at some point. But it's funny when you ask that question, one thing that comes to mind when it comes to money is, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but when I was a kid, I actually did a lot of fundraisers myself, which really doesn't make any sense. And I don't know where that idea came from, but I was super involved in a lot of different activities like Girl Scouts and this thing we used to call DI, which I think was, I can't even remember what it was titled, but just being in all these different like groups and communities. And when I would like see a need that was out there, I remember Hurricane Katrina hit in like 2005 or something like that. And just like doing a fundraiser for that. So it was, to raise money and to help others and to make sure other people like had what they needed. So that definitely was like a part of it. And money in general was just kind of like this idea that, as a kid, you don't totally understand a lot about, but I don't come from a lot of money by any means. My parents worked really hard to support us. So it was always kind of like, we have enough, but that's it. There we are,
Totally. And so as you found yourself sort of moving your way through high school, was it, I need to put my heads down to sort of get good grades for university? Were you someone who sort of popped into some part-time jobs here? Babysitters Club? What was life like for you in high school, and how did you navigate sort of, finding your way, figuring out some agency?
I begged my parents to let me work. I think I was 14 and I was like, I want a job. I want to go make money. I want to, be able to do things on my own. And I literally wasn't allowed to get a job. I don't know why. To this day, I don't know why. But I think my first job was, yes, like most girls do, I was a babysitter and would watch, kids in the neighborhood and my cousins and things like that. But my first real job with an actual paycheck, I worked at a local health food grocery store. And I think I was junior or senior in high school. And I loved that job. It was so fun to me. And I'm a very social person. And so, to be around people all day and chat with them at the register and all of that, it was so exciting. It was the biggest thing in my entire life. Yeah, I loved that job. I remember in college, thinking back on that job and being like, oh man, I wish I could be a cashier. It was just a good time. So it's so funny that those things shift throughout your life. And even just knowing why that job was so great it wasn't the money. I was getting paid minimum wage. It was just the social aspect of being there and, building community and being around people all day, every day was so fun for me.
I love that. And what did you do with your first dollars? What did you spend your money on?
I have no idea. I do not know what I remember getting my first paycheck and looking at it and having no idea why like all this money was being taken out before I got the money. And I was like, what's happening here, Mom? Like, why are you taking all my money? But I don't know if I bought anything special with it by any means.
Well, it's always fun to think about, our young lives being fueled by these early paychecks and these experiences that we sort of allow for ourselves and all the new agency. And so as you were sort of getting geared up and ready for university, at that time, had you known that you were going to end up being an entrepreneur? What was sort of going through your mind as you were preparing yourself for university? And how did that sort of inform what you would end up studying?
Well, when I was in high school, I remember feeling very uncertain about what I was supposed to go to college for. It felt like everyone around me knew the path that they wanted to go on, and I really didn't. And I say that with a grain of salt because these were feelings I was having in like sophomore year of high school, which is crazy because who at 14 is supposed to know what they want to do with the rest of their life? I don't know how people around me did, but I certainly didn't. And then when I was going into my junior year, I remember they were running a new course at my high school for interior design. And I heard about it and I signed some like petition to make it happen or something like that, and ended up taking this class. And it was the first time I'd really heard of interior design like this. I knew what interior design was, but I had never learned anything in regards to that space. And I took the class and something just clicked for me. And I felt like this is it. Like, okay, this is what I'll do. Like, this is now going to be my career. What schools offer this? What can I do in high school to prepare myself? So in high school, I started taking pre-college classes for interior design. So I lived just north of New York City. And so I would train into the city most Saturdays and I would go to the Fashion Institute of Technology. I took summer classes at the New York School of Interior Design and all of these different courses that I could take to just learn the most that I could and be prepared and line myself up to be accepted to these schools, which are quite hard to get into. And that ended up landing me in the Fashion Institute of Technology, got into the school, and I went to school fully thinking that that would be the career path that I would be on. I had no intention of being an entrepreneur, certainly no intention of ending up in marketing, but that was kind of how I landed in interior design. And I mean, I did everything I could to prepare for that and succeeded there. Then, you graduate and you realize, well, maybe this isn't the path that I want to be on forever. So here we are today.
When you decided you wanted to go into interior design, were your parents like, we are so happy, Emma, that you're following your passions, that you're really going after what you want? How did they sort of talk to you and what was sort of the understanding, as you were getting ready to pay for university? Were they like, we've got your bag, go for it, go do what you want? Did you have to sort of think about finances at all sort of in that process? What was the financial component like?
There wasn't a lot of conversation around finances with regards to college. I knew that my parents had been saving for school for my sister and I, but I also knew that I would need to take out loans. I just didn't know what that looked like, but I intentionally applied majority to New York State schools for just to have a lower, loan rate at the end of college. I feel like most people just kind of go in blind and you're like, oh, like college is expensive, but what does that really mean? And what kind of loans are you going to end up with? And what are your payments going to look like after school? I'm still paying down student loans for a degree that I don't use, And so that happens to a lot of people as well. But there wasn't a ton of conversation. I did know, though, that it wouldn't be fully covered by my parents, though, by any means.
I feel like it's always interesting, taking out college loans tends to be sort of the first time as a young person where we are like really involved in money, and like I'm taking on this responsibility. the responsibility isn't often at all sort of articulated as to what that means or what that looks like. And yet it becomes this thing that many people have to do in order to get the education to pursue dreams and sort of be what they want. Now, as you were moving towards the end of your university experience, what were the next steps? How did you start to navigate early life in the working world? What were some of your first jobs? Did you negotiate a salary? Like, how did you start to get your feet on the ground? Because obviously New York City is not a cheap place to be. It's not easy to be there as a young person. I remember being out of university and being in New York and being like, well, thank God there are so many free things to do here because I'm not making enough money to support all of my habits and things that I want to do. So what was it like for you sort of getting going?
When I was in school, they required a lot of internships to, get class credit, to get through courses, etc. So I luckily had quite a bit of intern experience while I was in school. And during my senior year, I landed an internship through a connection that I had at this firm. And it was great. It was exactly what I wanted to be doing. They were doing what you call commercial interior design, which is basically anything besides residential interior design. So anything outside of the home. So this firm was actually specializing in office design. And I went there and I was like, this is so cool. These spaces are so massive. We're doing such cool work. And I was so fortunate to be offered a job before I graduated at that firm. So as I was kind of going through the motions in my senior year, which was when I was starting to realize okay, I'm kind of building a marketing company and taking on all this work. And is that maybe what I want to do? But then I land this dream job before I even graduate. And I just felt like that was the way the universe was like, no, you're doing design. This is your path. You meant to do this. We're going to stick here. And so when I was offered the job, I did negotiate the salary. I asked for, several $1,000s more. We kind of met in the middle there. And it wasn't anything crazy. I was just happy to have a job. I was 22 years old. I was like, oh my God, I'm not unemployed. This is amazing. There were a lot of people around me that didn't land a job when they were, before they graduated. So I was really lucky I hate that word lucky. I was fortunate to land that job, but the salary that I was given was not enough to live in New York City. So I ended up moving home for a year after college. And like I said, I grew up about an hour north of New York City. And so there's a train that I would take every single day. And so for an entire year, I had a 2-hour commute each way to and from work. So every day for 4 hours, I would drive, train, walk, subway between my parents' house and my job. And that was, kind of a tough experience. And the whole time I was just like, I wish I made more money so I could live in the city and I could just take a subway to work. But it ended up being so foundational for me as a human because I spent those 4 hours every single day learning and setting up my marketing company to be what it is today. And so I really took advantage of that time. And I think that sometimes when you aren't given the means to do what you think you want to be doing, it's actually just kind of redirecting you to be resourceful and to find a way to make your current circumstance work for you.
That's incredible, Emma. So you clearly had the entrepreneurial bug early and young and knew it was your calling. And so how did you start to, moonlight or build your business or start to work on your marketing company as you were working this other job? What did the process look like for you? Were you saving money so you could start the business? The big leap, often when we're younger, the big leap, it's like, well, what's the worst that can happen? I could go to this other thing. And to be honest, that still kind of holds true no matter what age, right? It's like, what's the worst that can happen? The universe is really always has our back. But what was it like for you sort of starting to build out what this marketing agency would look like? And when did you decide and what were the dominoes that fell that made it possible for you to take the big leap?
Well, I fully had no plan for several years. The idea that you just said, what's the worst that can happen ended up being sort of the catalyst for me. But to back into that, really, I was just sort of organically, getting more work. I would go up and cold pitch myself to people that I was meeting in the design industry, and I would let them know what I was doing, and I was building this thing, and I could help them and do X, Y, and Z. And I did a lot of cold pitching and a lot of rejection. And I think that's incredibly important for anybody to constantly be rejected, because it teaches you so much resilience in everything that you do. I constantly get rejected still, and I love it. Like that, let's go. Like that, builds you up and that fires you up to keep going, in my opinion. But what really kind of pushed and got me to the point where I was able to leave interior design and go all in with marketing was every year. So I would have my, your yearly review with your boss at your job. And, you'd talk about your salary and you talk about what's coming up this year and what you accomplish. And every year for 3 years, I went into that conversation, and I was, I was happy at my job. I wasn't unhappy at my job. I really loved what I was doing. And that was the challenging part for me. Was I loved design, and I really wanted to see what I could do with this marketing agency that I was building. And that was kind of just like being torn between two different things. And so I would go into this review, and every year I'd be like, I just want to tell them I got to go, and I got to go build this thing. And I never could build myself up enough to say it, because that's so scary. But then when the pandemic hit, early 2020, it shook everything up, obviously, for everybody. In the design space, it really took a hit, because there was a lot of problems with inventory and tariffs, and especially in this specific company I was working for was designing office buildings. No one was going to work. It's like no one needed new office buildings. So there was a lot more time to kind of look at, 95 Media and the marketing company. And at the same time, in the beginning of 2020, we lost almost every single client, because no one had new work coming in and no one had enough money. No one was generating, revenue in the beginning of 2020. But by the summer of 2020, something shifted in almost every business, and everyone kind of realized, oh crap, social media marketing is the only way I'm going to get through this. And so very quickly, we went from almost zero clients to exploding and signing a ton of clients, and just everything kind of changed for 95 Media that summer. And my annual review was that September, and no one was getting raises. It was 2020. You're just lucky to have a job at that point. So there was no conversation around that. But I went into that conversation just being like, I think I have to do this. Like, if I am ever going to see what I can do, it's going to be in this time of the world where nothing is certain, and where everything feels like it's falling apart, and everyone's just throwing things at a wall and seeing what sticks. So I decided that summer, fall, that I needed to make a plan for what it looked like in order to leave my job and really look at being an entrepreneur full time.
Right.
And the number one thing that I did to make that plan was figure out how to start paying myself, because I, until that point, really had not paid myself. I would take a little bit of money here and there, but it was every dollar was going back into the business to build it. So to pay our team and to pay for softwares and to do all the things to operate a small business. And so I figured out, okay, what is the revenue number we have to hit every month to pay the team, to pay our expenses, and to start paying myself like just enough to scrape by, like just enough to be able to survive here. And so once we hit that number 3 months in a row, it was December of 2020, because I was like, I need to know we can do this consistently. It's not just a one-off fluke. So I made a goal, like 3 months, we're going to hit this revenue number, and then I'll feel good about it, as if anything's guaranteed. And then December of 2020, we did. I put in my notice in the middle of December, like right before the holidays. And by January 1st, I was a full-time entrepreneur. And it was so scary, because I remember I had the conversation with my boss, and then I left the meeting and I went to the bathroom and I sobbed. I was like, I can't believe I am 25 years old in the middle of a global pandemic, giving up, quote unquote, a steady paycheck, and I'm just going to bet on myself. Like, am I crazy? But luckily, it was the best thing I've ever done.
That's amazing, Emma. As you were sort of getting ready to launch this business, how much sort of personal financial planning had you done? Was it, I have some money in savings right now. I knew that no matter what, I'm going to be able to sort of, cover things. Is it, hey, mom and dad, like, I need you guys to have my back because I'm not sure sort of what's going to happen at the next turn. I think that a big piece of sort of success in entrepreneurship is around sort of understanding what are the support systems around you, either self-made support systems, financial resources, et cetera, or resources, sort of emotional, physical resources outside of you, family, friends, et cetera, to really sort of help you make the best decisions for your business. Because if you're worried about paying for your coffee in the morning, or you're worried about not being able to have dinner, then you can't really make the best decisions for your business, right? It's like there's too much sort of at the stake there. So how did you sort of prepare yourself for what was coming up and this big pivot that you did in January?
I was really fortunate to be able to move home for a year when I left my job and decided to go full time into entrepreneurship. So that was really, I mean, if I hadn't done that, as you said, like, to be worried about being able to pay Manhattan rent is not something I wanted to be doing at that time. So I moved home and ended up living in a few different places throughout that year and just kind of finding my way. And by the less than a year later, we were in a very different place. That first year of going all in on building 95 Media was our most massive year of growth that we've still ever had. And it was crazy that year, but the support system was crucial, as you said. I mean, to be able to live with family and to not have to worry about rent or a mortgage payment. And then looking outside of that as well, I joined some entrepreneurship groups. There was one called SCORE that I joined at that time. I think that every state has like SCORE chapters, which was really, really great for me at that period to be around other people who were going through the same journey and who were building brands just like I was. It was really an incredible year looking back and just the amount of growth that happened. But absolutely having support systems in place, family, friends, other entrepreneurs as well, was so important on that path.
So it's so wonderful. It's lovely to sort of see how the universe will sequence things for us really quite perfectly, right? It's like, oh, this thing happened, and this thing and that thing. And, it's really beautiful to see how things snowball. Obviously building wealth as an entrepreneur is risky, right? It can require us to look at money and resources in a variety of different ways. And so you've now been full-time in your business for a few years and sort of starting to look at, what wealth building will mean for you. So from that lens of your personal finances and how you think about money, is everything still going back into the business? Are you able to draw down a salary that allows you to, invest in a brokerage account or sort of take other steps? What does Emma's pie look like? And how are you starting to set yourself up?
Yeah, it's so funny because I remember a distinct moment maybe about 2 years ago. So at that point, I had been full-time in the business for about 2 years. And I remember just kind of looking up one day and being like, oh my God, like, what about me? What about my money? Because everything had been so focused and so laser focused on the business and making sure that the business financially was in a good place and that, funds were going in the right accounts and we were paying the right people. And then I woke up one day and I was like, oh no, I'm in my late 20s and I don't know what I'm doing for myself and how I'm setting myself up. So where we are now is a very different place because I've luckily have a few years now to be like, okay, we're going to get our things in check here and just put a little more focus on setting myself up, because I think as entrepreneurs, we often forget that we ourselves are different entities than the business. It's hard to remember that at all times, but things can get very overlapping. And at the end of the day, we are separate. So for myself, you said brokerage account. I have a brokerage account. Saving for retirement has been a really important piece as well. Obviously, when you work at a corporate job, that's what your company helps you do. And that does not exist as the owner of a company. Prior to us having, what do we have now? I think we have 5 employees at our company at this point. So prior to having other employees, when I was the only employee of 95 Media, I had a solo 401k account, which is fantastic. I would highly recommend it if you're the only employee of your company. I now have a SEP IRA for retirement, brokerage accounts, high yield savings accounts, all the good stuff to make sure that money is going in the right places. Because I really, really believe that like if you are not looking at yourself financially, making sure that you're set up, it can kind of backfire on the business, because then you're going to hit a place one day where you realize you need to take money out of the business that may be unexpected, and then you screw over the business. Rather, if we had just planned along the way to pay yourself a good salary and take the money out that you need to along the way, then both you and the business can be set up in a bit better angle.
Oh, I love that. It's fantastic that you've made such great initiatives early on in your business to be able to set things up. I think that can sometimes be the last thing that entrepreneurs think about is, what about me? But ultimately, again, if you're not doing well, the business isn't doing well. If you're not feeling sort of secure and on the right path, then it's hard for the business to sort of breathe life and be as successful as the potentiality of it. As you are sort of looking at goal planning, both personally and then also sort of thinking about this body of work that you're creating, is there a vision of your life that you are working into right now? Are there financial goals, business goals? How do you sort of see this next chapter of this momentum that you're building?
Well, right now I am 29, and 29 has been a weird age so far. I've only been 29 for a few months, and I'm like, oh man, no one warns you about how 29 feels out here, because I really am in this very interesting stage where you're kind of wrapping up your 20s, looking back on this crazy chapter of your life, and everyone has that. And simultaneously looking ahead to your 30s and saying, well, what does that look like? What do I want my 30s to look like? For me, when I was building 95 Media in my early 20s, when I was, side hustling and working full time and working like 80, 100-hour weeks, like it was like a crazy version of myself that even now I'm like, oh, I don't even know. But I remember being in it and knowing how unsustainable that was. And also knowing that I was willing to put in the time then because I didn't want to put it in later. So everything that I have built in my 20s has really been to set myself up for my 30s and 40s to not have to work nearly as hard as that has been. So as I look ahead to like my goals and what I'm building and what I want that next stage of my life to look like, we're doing so much in the business right now. When we got on our call, you were like, oh, how's it going? I was like, there's just a lot going on right now, because we're in this phase of business where we're setting so much up for the future. And it feels kind of weird where we are right now, because it's almost like we're laying the bricks for a building that we haven't created the blueprint for just yet. But I know that what we're building is going to be creating like the next stage of 95 Media. And I'm really excited for that, because our team is being set up to take on so much more and allowing me to step into a completely different role as the CEO. And I'm very, very excited and looking forward towards what that looks like. I don't know what it looks like, but we're just stepping into it and seeing what happens.
I love that. How fun and how fabulous. I think that having a big vision and wanting to like see the vision realized, the juiciest part is having the vision, right? It's like, this is going to be big. It's like being called to something that's bigger than you. It's unfolding and the information's coming and the bricks are being laid and the building's being built, and we can have foresight into things and plan them, but often the way things unfold tend to be better than anything we ever could have imagined. And so sort of releasing, okay, I'm building this thing. I don't know 1,000% where it's going. And that's probably really good because you're allowing for the spaciousness of the world to unfold. And that's important because we often can't be big enough. We can't, we just don't know what truly is possible. So Emma, what does money mean to you right now? If you were to put some words around what money means, what does it feel like? What does it mean to you? How do you sort of relate to it on the?
What a good question. Well, I think as entrepreneurs, you have such a different relationship with money because and this is what I realized in my early 20s was you end up holding and touching and passing more money as an entrepreneur and as a founder than most people do, right? Like you are overseeing all of this money that's coming in that a whole company is generating. And I remember there was a time where it felt like too much. I think it was maybe like our first, maybe like $20,000 month at the company. And I was like, hold on, $20,000? What is going on? And it felt so scary. But the more you expose yourself to that and the more you just kind of sit with it, that's what I had to do, is really just sit in it and look at it and be like, this isn't scary. This isn't something that I need to throw away. And I did a lot of money mindset work in my early 20s. I really enjoyed like Amanda Francis's work. And there was another one that I was really into that I'm blanking on. But I truly believe in like the power of money mindset because it made a huge difference for me. And now today, I really look at money as opportunity. And freedom feels like a very cliche word. So I wouldn't say freedom, but I would just say opportunity because money really does open so many doors for you, whether it's personally or professionally. Professionally, having more revenue in the company means we can hire more people and we can serve more brands and we can invest in better systems and better software for the company that serves everybody. And personally, it means, okay, maybe I can move into a nicer apartment and I can have a bigger office and I can buy nicer decor for like the Zoom meetings that I'm on for 8 hours a day, and just like the little things that set you up to have expansion in your life is really how I look at money today.
And are your siblings or your parents or is anyone else an entrepreneur, or are you sort of solo in the family journey of this wild roller coaster?
Officially, I would say I'm the only one, but my mom always did kind of like second jobs that were all hers. So she consulted. And now, I mean, I don't think that she had an LLC at the time. So I don't think it was like an official business. But today you would say, oh, you're consulting, you're coaching, you're, advising a company on X, Y, and Z. And that is fully what she did when I was growing up. And so I watched her do that, but it was never like, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about building a brand. There was never that conversation. But I do know that watching her build her own thing definitely impacted my own take on what it looks like to build something for myself as well.
Yeah. I think that as a young person, being our parents sort of figure it out. And when they take risk on themselves, it's such fantastic modeling. When they say, I'm going to pursue my passions or my dreams, it's really incredible, especially as young girls and young women, to be able to have modeling around, hey, you want to go do that? Go do that. You want to build something, you can have that. So some of my favorite questions, Emma, are certainly not just around, investing and earning money, but I also love talking about spending money and the fun things that we get to do with our money. What is it that you are enjoying spending your money on? And I'd also love to know, have you purchased for yourself any sort of milestone gift that have sort of marked some of the accomplishments that you've had with your business?
Yeah. One of the first things that I bought as like a milestone gift for myself, I remember I was working with a coach at the time and she introduced me to that idea. I was still very early on. And I remember talking about how like at that time and still, I felt like, I was building these big goals and then I would hit them and then it was just on to the next. And there was never a pause and there was never an opportunity to recognize these big things that were happening. And so she said, okay, well, when you do this next thing, I want you to think about what you want to buy for yourself. And at that time, we were not bringing in a lot of money. There was not, thousands of dollars left over where I could go out and do something extraordinarily nice for myself. But I remember we had a freebie. I created a free offer, like a free download. And it was my first time figuring out funnels and upsells and email sequences and all of this good stuff. And it went viral in a Facebook group at the time when Facebook groups were like super big. And we grew our email list by like 300 people in a day. And it was like the most exciting thing that ever happened to me up until that point. So I ended up buying myself this ring, which I actually still wear to this day. And it's just this little gold ring. It has a very, very tiny little diamond. It was like $300 at the time. And I got it and I was like, this is like, I'm going to remember this. And I'm so glad I did because, like I said, I still wear this ring. And I don't always think about it when I look at that ring, but when you kind of pause and have conversations like this, to have something that really means something to you is really, really special to commemorate a moment like that, because it was such a small part of the journey, but meant so much in that moment. And I can still feel that, But to answer your other question, what am I enjoying spending money on right now? Where I'm at now, several years later, I really love being able to wait and buy a nice like designer handbag. I just think that there's something that having something physical is really nice. Like a ring is great. It's on your body, but you don't really look at it that much. And having a handbag is just really nice. And so I do like maybe one a year, but nothing crazy. But
what are your favorites?
What are my favorites? Well, the first one that I got, I so love. It's a YSL bag. And it's just like this very like chic, timeless handbag. And I use it all the time still because it's like your first designer purchase. I think you don't forget. You're like, I saved for this. I bought this for myself. That means so much. And, I've had my boyfriend and parents buy me other things since then, but it just to be able to look at that and say, I worked for this. Like I bought this for myself when it was a lot of money to spend on that bag. And it is still such a special bag to me now.
Wow. I love that, Emma. That's amazing. So my final question has so much to do with what you're calling in right now, what you're bringing in, what you're cultivating. I always like to give a platform to our guests to make acts of the audience. I think that there's such a wonderful moment where people go, I really want to support this woman in what she's accomplishing, what she's building. And so all asks are available for you right now. But Emma, what might be some things that you're calling in? How can we support you?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to go through this. I appreciate that. Right now, our biggest thing is we're just really looking to call in like the right clients for 95 Media. We have spent so much of this year refining what we do and bringing in the right team and setting up everything to serve brands really well. We'd love to serve more brands that are looking to expand their social media marketing presence, work with an agency that can create high converting content and really build that community for their business. Like I said in the beginning, so much of what we do is just serving. And so all day, every day, we're serving our clients and helping them grow. And it's what I'm truly passionate about. It's what I built this company on, really just for the right clients to help this year and to help them build their brand and bring in new revenue of their own.
Amazing. Emma, you are an incredible founder. I'm so happy to have had you on the show today. Thank you for this fantastic conversation and for letting us hear a little bit more about what money life is like with Emma Tessler and how you're thinking about building in this incredible, beautiful world we live in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been so great. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.